I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Michael Treacy.
Hello, Lisa.
Hello, Michael.
Good to see you today. Lisa, today what we're going to talk about is growth. We're going to talk about a topic that is of immense importance to organizations far and wide, whether they be for-profit organizations or not-for-profits, public sector or private sector. Growth has become a significant agenda in this country for company and organization after organization. What seems to be driving it is the last 5 to 7 years we've seen an unprecedented focus on cost cutting and efficiency moves. And in fact, most organizations in America today are extraordinarily proficient at controlling and managing their costs. We see corporations that are achieving 10, 12, 15% growth in profitability, but they're doing it with virtually no growth in revenue. In fact, the typical organization in America these days is only growing 3 or 4 or 5% a year. And you can't keep growing profits at a faster rate than you grow revenue without eventually coming to a difficulty that there's simply no more cost to cut. If we look, for example, at the 30 companies that make up the Dow Jones Industrial Average, you see in a microcosm this challenge around growth. And that is that from 1997 to 2002, the companies that made up Dow Jones Industrial Average really grew revenue only about 4.8% and grew profitability, it turns out, just a little bit, but that's mostly because 1 or 2 of the companies in there were having substantial profit problems. But if you take out the 5 best performers, if you removed Merck, Citigroup, Walmart, Home Depot, what you find is that the other 25 companies in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, these are 25 highly prestigious organizations in America, grew their revenue from 97 through 2002 at barely the rate of inflation, 2.3% a year. And then the effect of a couple of bad performers shows that the profitability of that group actually sank. There's little doubt in my mind, many companies in this country have a very significant growth problem. Many not-for-profits, especially since 9/11, have a very significant growth problem. And the problem, it seems to me, is a problem that is fundamentally rooted in a lack of discipline, a lack of know-how about how do you drive growth in an organization. I've spent the last 7 years looking at a series of companies that have very successfully grown their revenue, grown their profitability year after year after year. In fact, if you look at the 1,000 largest publicly traded companies in the United States, I could identify 78 companies that from 97 to 2002, some good years and some bad years, were able to grow their revenues, their gross profit dollars, and their net income at double-digit rates in each of those years. I studied those companies to try to understand what was different about them, and what I want to report to you today is the findings of that study. What does it take to really drive double-digit growth? What does it really take? Now, I get a chance to go around the country and ask companies, why aren't you growing? And if you are growing, why are you growing? Here's what I hear from organizations when I challenge them about trying to grow their business at double-digit rates. The first thing you hear from corporations is, well, the market demand isn't there. I mean, if I was in pharmaceuticals, if I was in high tech, if it was in one of these fast-growing market segments, then perhaps we could grow at the rate you're talking about. But Michael, I'm in a flat market. Our industry is in industrial goods. We're only growing 3-4% as an industry. How could you expect me to grow much faster than that? Sounds like an excuse to me. The second thing you hear from corporations is competitor resistance. That if I was to grow at double-digit rates, I'd have to take share from my competitors, and we'd start World War III. They wouldn't lie down and give me that market share. They'd, in fact, be extraordinarily aggressive at trying to win back and keep the business that I'm trying to take away from them. The only winner in that scenario would be the customer, because we'd start a price war. The third thing you hear from companies is that they simply don't have the sales capacity to grow at that rate. We couldn't begin to add that much selling capacity, to add that many people to our organization to be able to grow at double-digit rates. Sometimes you hear it's not a sales capacity issue, but it might be an operational capacity, because a company that grows, an organization that grows at 10% a year, in 7 years you've doubled the business. That's twice the number of employees, twice the number of factories, twice the number of customers, twice everything. And that seems very difficult for a lot of people. I'll observe, though, that Walmart seems to be able to do it. And what's surprising is they do it on a base of revenue that is $250 billion. They do it with an employee base of almost 1.3 million employees, yet they've been able to grow their capacity year after year. The fourth thing you hear, but you typically hear this from smaller organizations, is the financial capacity is what limits our ability to grow. Growth costs cash that you typically have to invest before you see those returns, and you have to invest in increased working capital and other kinds of assets, and growth is expensive. It's one of the reasons that you find that a lot of real high-flying small companies, oftentimes they have to sell out to larger organizations simply to keep funding their very successful growth. Now these four reasons, market opportunity, competitive resistance, sales capacity, financial capacity, to me these are all excuses. This isn't the real reason companies aren't growing. The real reason they're not growing is they don't have the management capacity to grow. They don't have a management team that has the